And I think there's something so interesting to talk about with crushes specifically. Like, why are they so painful? Why is it like just a different experience than, even just a couple months into dating someone? Like that first
Oh,
flush of interest, and
uh-huh.
even if you don't pursue it, like having a crush is just such a full body experience.
God, it's so terrible and
It's
like
torture.
also pretty awesome too.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Hayden, the host of the Evergreen RX. I'm a licensed mental health therapist, Cancer Moon, first to get deep at any party. And today we are joined by my great friend, Ben. Ben is here to talk all about crushes, dating, attachment style, and just overall the minefield of being in a relationship, starting relationships. Ben is, I guess, a relationship expert in his own sense because he has his own experience. And he's also a therapist, IG therapy god. And he's got some hot / informed takes. So it's going to be a great episode.
Thanks for having me, Hayden.
Yeah.
Relationship expert is a crazy thing to say though. Wasn't expecting that one.
I've set the bar high from the
It's a
beginning.
really high bar and like, yeah, I guess from what you said, I'm an expert on my own experience. That's all I got.
Yep. You have a sprinkle, a touch of education as well.
Oh, for sure. I would say my grad school has a lot of my money that would provide some of that education. So I have to say that I do.
Yep. One of those things is definitely true, which is they have a lot of both of our money.
A lot of both of our monies.
But here it is. This is where we get the return on investment.
Oh,
This
thank God.
episode right here.
This is it.
So, Ben, tell me, just to start off, where do you stand on dating, crushes? What's your experience? How has it informed your view on relationships?
Very pro dating.
Okay.
Very pro crushes. I'm like, who's anti dating?
I'm sure there's incels, but
Right. That actually came up recently, and I don't know how deep we want to go with that.
2 minutes in, I mentioned incels. I'm already regretting it.
Pro dating and pro crushing. I think biologically we are programmed to reproduce and connect and pair off. And just like in a life sense, like it's way more fun that way.
Yep.
I don't know.
True.
I think the addition of another person, inviting them in, fawning over them and their personality and their interests is one of the main ways we expand ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is like, everybody knows that, but I don't think we explicitly talk about that enough.
Yeah.
Of like, when you enter into a relationship, you find something larger than yourself. And that is like the beautiful part of it.
Yeah, I love that you said that. You're already like diving into so many of the things I want to talk to you about. And one of those is just that the healing and the growth and the expansion that we get through relationships. And that's, all relationships too. But specifically in the romantic sense, there is something about like, say like being larger than yourself in that sense. It's like, it's because it's the self with like a mirror and just it being reflected back to you constantly.
Yeah.
With someone that you're like trying to navigate things with, because we might do that with friends sometimes. Like good friendships, you do navigate conflict, but intimate relationships, it's like a whole nother level. And I think that I heard on one podcast, it's this like human design podcast, but they talked about how the ego isn't a problem until another person enters the room. And it's kind of that idea with relationships is like, we're not that challenged. If it's just you out in nature and you have your survival needs met, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're covered. You're not really going to be as challenged, in my opinion, as you would be if there's one other person there with you.
Totally. That's making me think of just like the literary themes of like man versus nature, man versus man versus self. And like I don't even think you can make it to man versus self without the addition of another to point out that there's anything wrong.
To point out that there's like self.
To
Like
point out that there's
to go deep, so philosophical so quick, but
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, literally to have someone to point to the fact that you are like this entity, this individual being.
Yeah, and I use the term wrong, and I want to like retroactively bring that back, but like to challenge. You brought up friendships, and like friendships challenge me all the time,
Yeah.
but definitely not to the extent that a romantic partnership has. Those are where I think I've grown the most and found the sticky parts that I'm interested in. Change is a strong word, but bring more awareness to in myself and challenge those beliefs. Like, I don't do that in my friendships all the time. When my friends do things I don't like, I say, okay, great. Like, I'm not going to hang out with you this weekend.
Yeah.
Like, we'll catch up later.
Mm.
When there's like a romantic relationship problem, it's like, I want to spend every minute with you. We need to figure out how this is going to work out. And like,
Yep, and
hop into conflict.
that's on the attachment
Yeah.
bond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Right, because with friends, like we have more of them too, typically. And so it's like, you know, you can be like, okay, I'm not going to see you for a little bit. Fine, because my attachment has somewhere else to go. Like,
Yes.
and just the way that it is. And I think to a degree, like the way it is socially kind of conditioned, but also that biological, like human drive and what gets activated as in us when we like are in love. It's like that is the healing, reparenting attachment system. That is the new caregiver. And if anybody doesn't know about attachment, we're going to touch on some more about that in a little bit. But it is just that feeling of like kind of being tethered to someone the way that you would, you know, when you're a child and you've got your parents.
Brought up something of like the relationship is the healing and the repairing. And this is like I don't think it's a hot take, but like healing doesn't happen in isolation.
Yes. It's not a hot take between us. I don't know if it's a hot take otherwise.
I think it might be,
but
like with people, and I also like that's a black and white statement, and that I like disagree with. But
how does it happen in isolation? How does it happen in isolation? Like,
I don't know. I don't know if it does.
You can learn. I think I was talking to a friend about this the other day. You can learn so much on your own. You can do a lot of growth. You know, typically you'll hear people that they go through a breakup and then they're like, I want to work on myself. And they maybe are starting to go to therapy or, you know, trying to heal things that were a problem.
Immediately going to therapy, not isolation.
Period.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. Because, yeah, already that is such a good point because it's like we think like, I'm going to work on myself. And then a lot of times nowadays, that does include therapy. Okay, so it's not yourself. And even if you were journaling and you were just doing a lot of deep self-exploration, the way that you really put that work to the test is in relationship. And the next time, you know, if you have a certain trigger from your past romantic relationship, that will get triggered the next time you're with someone, no matter how much work you've done on it. At least that's my opinion. And that is the moment where you really do the healing because you're triggered and you choose a different action and you get a different result. And like, how do you do that? You don't really trigger yourself in the same way.
I really like that definition of healing. That's a really good one.
Oh, thank you.
Oh my gosh, there's so much there. There's something I wanted to like go look up before this podcast and I totally forgot, but it's at the beginning of like the 7 conversations for EFT therapy. I don't know if you have that one or not. And it talks about this person who like went and lived in isolation towards the end of their life. It might have been like 10 years because they just like couldn't take it. They just wanted to be alone. And eventually they came and like found him and he was dead, and he had written out on the wall, "Joy is not real if experienced alone." And I remember like that just like shocking me, of like, wow, what a like really powerful story. And I brought it to my therapist at the time, and I'm kind of like going to the other side of our question we just brought up, and she was like, I brought that up and I was like, that he's so right, like you can only really experience life with each other and growth. And she was like, no, I disagree.
Yeah.
I was like, really?
Okay.
And she was like, yeah, I think you have the full expansive experience on your own. And we like kind of got into it for like the session about differing opinions on it, and how she believed that like life can be fully experienced alone, and it is a misnomer to say that we have to be in relationship. And I don't like take anything back on what I've stood on here so far, because I do believe like growth, change, and expansion happens far more together than it does alone. But I don't.
But just that it's not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, generally I do think we need both. But I'm pro crushes in dating because it is that opportunity to have a mirror in front of you and create safety that you may not experience on your own. You may not feel the same way about all of your beliefs and choices when another person you care about so much has like entered the equation.
Yeah. Okay, so I like what you said, because we are like delineating between crushes and dating.
Okay.
Which is, I think, is an important part of this conversation we wanted to have, because we talked about this, not on the record. And I think there's something so interesting to talk about with crushes specifically. Like, why are they so painful? Why is it like just a different experience than, even just a couple months into dating someone? Like that first flush of interest, and even if you don't pursue it, like having a crush is just such a full body experience.
God, it's so terrible, and
It's
like
torture.
Also pretty awesome too.
Yeah.
You bring up crush, and I think of like Delulu that's been really hot on the internet right now. It's just like you're just in a self delusion.
Yeah.
Which I can't 100% quote, but I was hearing about the study that the more positively delusional, I use that term lovingly, you are about your partner, the happier you are in relationship. And the more negatively delusional you are in relationship, the more you find wrong and the more areas you find that you don't like.
Yeah.
And so with the crush, it is this wild ride of delusion of like, do they like me? Do they hate me? Do they want to talk to me right now? Yeah. I sure hope they do. It's like hyperdrive attachment activation.
And hugely positive, like the most positive delusion you can possibly have. It's like our imagination gets to run wild with this new person of like, they're everything I was looking for, and this is how my life is going to be. And you're even romanticizing like, what would it be like to like have breakfast with them, like, right? Or just the most mundane things, because it's just like there's something so innate within us to be like, oh, partnership and love, and like everything is so beautiful. It's like the rose-colored glasses thing that people talk about. Anyway, getting back to kind of crushes on that, you talked about the attachment style activation that's happening, and so I think this is like a good moment to maybe just touch on what we mean when we're talking about attachment style. Do you want to take this? Do you want to give a brief primer on attachment style?
Sure, I can do a primer. We can kind of play off of each other.
Okay.
Attachment styles based off of a study where it's the like unknown or uncertain situation scenario, and they put babies in this room with their parental figure, who's typically was a mother in this scenario, with a stranger who is the researcher. And they found a pattern in the baby's behavior of when the mother would leave the room and when they would return. They found that secure ones would have a moderate range of distress and soothing when the mom would come back. They found that the more anxiously attached children were much more distressed when the mother left the room, and were far more difficult to soothe after the fact.
Yep.
Avoidant was more, they wouldn't allow themselves to be soothed as much with the mother when they would return.
They'd be more like ambivalent.
More ambivalent. That's another term which I think is much more kinder to that attachment style
Right.
than avoidant, but that's kind of like the term people have been drawn to as well.
Because it's like the baby would be more like ambivalent when the mom would leave and when she would return. Like the baby would just kind of keep playing, which isn't, what was considered normal behavior of being somewhat distressed on your caregiver leaving as a child. And so, and one other one that I think got added later, disorganized, or it's also called like fearful avoidant. Because some of these attachment styles, if you look them up, sometimes there's varying titles for them.
So many different names.
Yeah, lots of different names. But fearful avoidant is kind of a mix of both behaviors. Like it's more like dependent on the situation and what's going on, especially like in adults. It will look like just a kind of random mix of avoidant and anxious, wanting to pull someone close and cling and hold on, and then wanting to push someone away and distance yourself.
And that has a lot to do with these children not knowing what to expect in response to their distress as they're growing up. And so their system doesn't know exactly how to respond either. And so it can kind of fluctuate a lot.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where the attachment teachings start to stray from that original experiment, because it's really like, okay, that was observing the behavior that was instilled, and then there was like research doing like, okay, but what created that behavior? And it was based off how the caregiver would respond most often to the child. And so it's like, I know there was like a phase in parenting that was like, let him cry it out.
Oh God. Yeah, like don't soothe them.
Don't soothe them. Yeah. So that, would probably create more of an avoidant attachment stereotypically, because you learn nobody's going to come soothe my needs. So I have to do it myself. It's a very like avoidant, very individualistic, anxious, your typical cliche, stereotypical, like a clingy person. And then fearful avoidant would be whatever mix there is.
The most important thing that I always educate though when talking about attachment systems is whatever category you're in, the 2 points I always make is, one, it is plastic. You can change. Yes. You have neuroplasticity around your attachment styles, that while there is a degree of ingrained style you're born with, you can change that.
Yep.
You can change that through re-experiences with friends, partners, loved ones, a therapist, everyone. The other one is that every attachment style is seeking connection. They just all do it in a very different way that some people might disagree with and more or less demonize.
Yes, and it's very common for someone that's more anxious to partner with someone that's more avoidant. Because, we can look at that on the kind of beautiful or positive side, which is people are attracted to what's going to help them heal. So that's, I think that's kind of the opposites attract idea too.
Do you think an anxious and avoidant will help each other heal?
I think that's the intention.
This is a hot take. I like it.
I think that's the intention when we partner with someone that has a different attachment style, because it's like, what is the most triggering thing to an anxious attachment? Someone that is hard to pin down,
Yeah.
someone that wants to push away, individualize. That is the most triggering thing. Too anxious, there's still problems, with any kind of, even if you had too secure, which like they say 50% of people are secure, but it's like,
They really
where is
do.
that fact?
Where do I meet those people?
Yeah, I've never
I
met.
need them in my life.
You can do earn secure. You do work and you can, get to earn secure, but it's also, it varies in each of our relationships too. So I don't know where that stat comes from, but I think that too anxious people or too avoidant people or whatever, it's easier to kind of just like go along because that person is at least doing your behavior that is maybe like, it's not the most functional behavior, but at least it matches. So when you're pushing away, somebody else is pushing away. And so you're kind of like, you're able to get your space versus the anxious in that, if we're talking anxious avoidant attachment, the avoidant is trying to push and they have something to push against, but that kind of like escalates the system and escalates it.
The goalposts continue to move.
And if you're wanting to stay in that relationship, or if you want to build something healthier, it creates more conflict.
Yeah.
Because both people are extremely unhappy when that's happening.
And that's like, not to blanket, but like so much work in the therapy office is clients coming in and they tell me about their relationship, and 9 times out of 10, one's seeking closeness and the other is pulling away.
Yep.
And it's the anxious avoidant, the pursue and flee dynamic that just replays itself a lot. And so, going all the way back, when you have a crush on someone and there's not this predetermined level of safety of like even this verbal, you're my girlfriend, you're my boyfriend, you're my partner, whatever it is, then I have nothing to like regulate my system with.
Oh yeah, it's pure chaos.
Then it's just chaos, and I have questions, and I have nothing to soothe myself because my brain has already created all these different scenarios of like, what's breakfast gonna be like?
Exactly. I was about to say, it's the delusion that really hurts us in crushes, because the delusion starts activating the attachment. I'm going off the cuff of like, you start to see this person, at least in your imagination, as an attachment figure, because you're envisioning your day-to-day life with them or certain behaviors, but they're not yet an attachment figure, and you don't even know if they want that. So then it's like, complete disarray of how do you regulate when it's like what's happening in your mind, which is, most people probably already know that what we imagine is just as real to the mind as what we actually experience. And so it's like that cognitive dissonance between, in my mind, you're my wife. And in reality...
But you won't text me back.
Yeah, in reality, we've talked at the coffee shop 3 times. Like,
Well, this is like, okay, yes. Like, to all of that is... But the question I have is like, what are we supposed to do? Not be delusional?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Why not?
Well, because that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
If we're not delusional, we're going to take all the fun out of it.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Because I think, like, that is the fun.
That is the fun. And it's the opportunity to know yourself better.
And?
Because then it's like, so crushes, we know they're painful. But we're not going to stop doing it because it's also fun and exciting. So being able to, like, take the painful parts of it and learn more about yourself and explore that more deeply, which I would say also prepares you better for when maybe a relationship does start to form. Because a relationship, I don't know, I don't want to put a timeline on how long it is that you're really like navigating coming together. It's a lifelong process, but it's very acute. Maybe first year.
Sure.
Typically. And that is also a very attachment activating process. So if during the crush phase, you even start to have awareness then of, oh, I'm tending to like, feel really worked up about this and I'm going to start working on that now, then you're better equipped when and if it actually turns into a relationship.
Yeah. I think the key here, and maybe always, is self-soothing.
Yeah.
Because we're always, so we get a crush and we look to them to fill this role, to provide experiences, feelings, like make memories, all these things. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I think a great question to ask ourselves when that happens is, can I provide any of this for myself? Is there any room in my life that I'm waiting for someone else to take care of me? Because I think that happens a lot. And I don't want to deter delusion and excitement. One, you can't stop yourself. It's more biological than it is cognitive.
Yeah.
So why not enjoy it? But also, this is where we don't heal in isolation, is like, this highlights more parts of yourself that want attention and need love.
Yes.
And maybe we shouldn't put all of that outside of our own body.
See, this is like, we've already dug so deep into this, which is what this podcast is all about. But what you're saying here is like really a good kind of culmination of what I'm intending to do with these conversations, which is like, yeah, we're not going to like stop crushes. We would never want to do that. It's just about like, how do you become even more intentional and even more curious and more informed with your relationship to yourself? Like, what is it like to think this deeply about this thing that just happens, and we see it in movies and we hear about it and we talk to our friends about it, and like, but if it is painful for you, if that is part of your experience and you want it to feel different, then why not try?
Yeah.
Like, why not do things that practice self-soothing? Because also all of these skills always translate, across the board.
Totally.
Like, they're just going to help improve your life. And so it's like, yeah, literally nothing wrong with the way that relationships and crushing and dating and stuff goes right now. I mean, you could argue there's a lot wrong.
There's a lot.
But you don't have to change any of it.
No.
But you can think about it.
The only thing in your power is you and how you show up in these environments. And it's like, yeah, you're going to put yourself dating in your 20s. I'm sure we'll maybe talk about that more, but like, it can be very surface level and short-lived and a lot of ghosting, a lot of avoidance. You can't change somebody else's behavior there, but you can change how you respond and how you show up.
Oh, you just segued so good into the next. This is so good because I want to talk about what the balance between being authentic and playing the game is.
Ugh.
And as I think we need to add in this disclaimer, this like info, and you can let me know if you don't want to share this, but Ben and I are both identified as tending to be more anxiously attached.
Oh, for sure.
So that is something to take into account. If any avoidantly attached or more so are listening, then maybe some of this stuff you're like, I don't feel that way. Like, what are you talking about? This is crazy. And part of that, I think, becomes really important when we're talking about the line between authenticity and playing the game, because at least from our experience, being more anxious and dating makes you want to not play it cool at all.
I've never been cool.
Yeah. And then there's also that extra judgment of like, you can't be all clingy. That's gross.
Yeah.
So it's like, it does kind of like, get really tricky. Maybe in some ways I think dating definitely favors more avoidance because it is like, that is what playing
Modern
it cool
day
looks like.
Dating.
Oh yeah. Before it was anxious because you'd get engaged in 2 days.
Yeah.
And it was perfect for anybody that was anxiously attached.
So I don't have an answer. I guess I just have my experience. I'm like so pro authenticity. I'll never forget, like, I got in an argument in class during our grad program with someone who didn't believe authenticity existed, and I was like, what do you even mean?
Why are you studying this?
How did you get here?
Oh my
And
God.
no shame in him or whatever, maybe whatever. I'm just like pro authenticity through and through.
Yeah.
And that can look different for everyone. It does look different for everyone. And for me, sometimes that looks like being very upfront with how I'm feeling
Yeah.
and what I want and what I'm looking for. Has that worked out for me all the time? No. However, I can think of a very specific instance. Like, I met someone and we had so much in common: music tastes, literature interests, like very active, like going to a lot of, like, all across the board. I was like, oh my God, like,
Soulmate.
what a perfect match for me. And we had a wonderful time together, and we were like trying to set up a second date. Like, this is all one date for the record. And I definitely like started to create these narratives and these stories. And a second date never happened, and I never heard from them again.
Oh,
And in reflecting on this with some other people who like watched me live out this experience, other people's opinions were, yeah, you didn't play the game. You were too interested. You were too upfront. I can't say what she was feeling throughout this experience, but I can say I don't regret my behavior in any way.
yeah.
Because what a good missed opportunity. Like,
Because you don't want to play the game either.
I don't want to play the game, and I don't want someone who wants to play the game.
Exactly. So it's not a match on that, perspective.
It never
because-
would have worked out.
Right. It would have been, yeah, it wouldn't have like nurtured what you were needing or looking for in that relationship, because if it forced you to play the game,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't feel authentic to you.
No.
And probably not to most people, but it just would have been too draining.
Right. And so this is like the line of like, where do we want more authenticity, and where do we feel like we might need to play the game more? If I wanted more options and to be in a relationship, I would probably say I would have to play the game more.
Yeah.
Because being more authentic limits the pool. It limits who would be interested in me.
Who's ready to receive that
Yeah.
too. And it depends on where people are at in their own relationship to dating, and if they are expecting someone to kind of play this game and they're kind of doing it too, then it might just be too jarring for someone to not be doing that, which, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just somebody at a different point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is bringing me to kind of like how I prefer this question, which is like the balance between authenticity and managing self-soothing attachment anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it is, because when we're talking about the game, what I think we're referring to is like the don't text him for 2 days.
Yeah, let's
like,
be clear.
See each other once a week for the first however many months.
All these made up rules.
Right. Made up rules that somehow permeate and like everybody seems to know them or think that they know them.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think is a better side to balance is like, if you're not like a person that's like wants to wait in between texting, then like don't do that. That just feels fake.
Mm-hmm.
But also like check yourself
Totally.
a little on like, am I wanting to reach out to this person because I want them to soothe me so that I don't feel so anxious about this right now? Like, I can even say my own experience recently with making like new friends, there's like this component of like, do you like me? Like, do you want to keep hanging out? And it makes me want to like reach out and be like, oh, it was like great to hang out, to see if they like respond to that.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong, but it's also sometimes I find myself like checking on that and being like, do I need that? Like, is this genuinely just because I want to let them know I had a good time?
Yeah.
Or do I want them to make me feel better?
Uh-huh. Oh, it's that a lot.
A lot of the time. So it's like, I don't want them to make me feel bad.
Totally. And like, I also, through your story, something was coming up for me is like, I've been on the other side of the story I told too, where somebody else was far more interested in me than I was interested.
Oh, it hurts on that
And
side
it
too.
hurts on this side too, because I lose interest and I am well aware I'm writing a story that they are far more interested in me.
I'm well aware.
Yeah.
They're obsessed with me.
How could they not be, obviously? And that doesn't feel good either, but this is like the plasticity of like attachment systems, that it depends on the context and it depends on the person too.
Yeah. Yeah. And learning to like, I think most people probably have an experience being on both sides of what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when you are on the kind of, I guess we could call it more rejecting side, but you know, just you're not as interested or whatever. You know, it's like, it's not personal.
No.
It's personal, but it's not personal. It's like you're just, for whatever reason, you don't click in the same way that they do. And maybe there's certain qualities you don't like about them, but that really has more to do with your preferences than anything wrong with them. And that's a very hard thing to get through your head. I think, like,
it's not
as
about
the
you.
person that has been rejected too, of like, they could literally be like, no, I just didn't like that you were like this, you were like that, you were like that. And it still would be like, okay, yeah, that is your preference in people.
It's not about you.
It's not about me. You might be listing qualities of me, but there's other people in the world that would be like, I love you because of this and that and that.
100%.
But it's just being able to have that internal dialogue that's more moderated, that's more taking in the whole picture, and being able to be excited and be paced like properly. And
that's so hard.
Right,
Pacing. Sorry, that's like such a good word, because it's such a, I think the skill here is zooming out versus urgency.
Oh my God.
Urgency is something that comes up a lot for everyone, and is a topic I like hit on a lot in the therapy room. And urgency is like your attachment style, like activating.
I think there's this idea that we create that's like, okay, if we have this certain title to a relationship, that means that you can't leave.
Yeah.
I can't be hurt.
Uh-huh.
Which obviously then once we get into that, once you're like, oh, we're boyfriend and girlfriend or whatever, we're partners, then there's a whole new slew of fears that come in.
Totally.
But there's this illusion that if you would just tell me that we're on the same little, like, we're in the same boat together, then I can soothe and feel like I'm not going to be left or whatever it is. Back to what we're saying about healing in relationship.
Yeah.
Because it's like you can, you know, I can know that I'm texting someone that I had a great time because I hope that they will text me the same thing and then I can feel better. I can know that I'm doing that for this validation that will make me feel a little bit better for a second and soothe me. And I can still choose to do it because that's okay. Sometimes we can have other people help soothe us too and like be a part of that healing process.
Interdependence, not codependence.
Yes. So talking about this whole process of, you know, attachment and dating, crushing, just like how it is a pretty challenging process in some regards. It's great, it's wonderful, and it's tough.
Very tough.
And it's a beautiful opportunity for growth, like really good time. I feel like beginning stages, you know, I like to work with like dating in therapy because I think the beginning stages of a relationship, fertile ground for creating new patterns.
Yeah.
Like that is like prime real estate to do things differently. So how do you think we can maybe like build in a little bit of support or kind of this like false hindsight in the moment when we're so unsure about how our relationship is going to go, what it's going to look like, so that we are able to enjoy the process a little bit better for all of the like wonderful things that it brings?
Can you define false hindsight?
Yeah, so this is, I haven't Googled this, so I don't know. Maybe somebody else has said this, or maybe it's just my weird way of describing, like basically giving ourselves perspective before we have the information that kind of naturally gives perspective. Like,
Mm-hmm.
say when you start dating and you're like, oh, does this person like me?
Mm-hmm.
If you could fast forward 5 years and see that you're in this like beautiful relationship together, you live together, it's amazing, and it all worked out.
Yeah.
In that future self, you have all the hindsight. You're like, oh my God, I was so nervous when we started dating. That's so funny. Like, I can't believe I was worried if you liked me when you were just, and now I know all the stories that were going on in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And now I know it's so crazy that I was so nervous. How do we like fake that?
I don't know if I want to. False hindsight maybe for me would look differently of accepting that we don't know what's in the future. My body wants to go more towards trusting that I can't know how it's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the fun part.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the dysregulating part too. But like the key word here is trust.
Yeah.
Is trust in myself to show up exactly how I want to.
Yes. Yeah. I love that, because then the moments themselves are beautiful and wonderful, and it doesn't really matter how it's going to turn out, because I think it's like we're kind of getting at the same ideal like feeling to bring in, so that this process is a little bit more leaning towards the fun side than just getting so caught up in the distress, especially when you like really like someone, because then you're like, oh, this has to work out. Like, this person is, they're my person.
Yeah.
Like, they're my match. But I think sometimes that takes us out of presence. That's kind of where this question came from for me, where it's like we're out of presence a little because we're so caught up in if it's going to work out, which is just a way of trying to avoid fear and trying to avoid pain, trying to predict the future, which we love to do.
Our brains just love to do
We love to do it.
Yeah.
Because we just do not like the idea that we can't. And that does remove us from presence. And sometimes it could be like you're on this really amazing date with this person you're just loving to get to know, and you're so caught up on whether or not they're going to be the one for you, where it's like,
or if there's another date.
But then, or if there's another date, and then it's like, oh, but then if you were able to see that things worked out, or you dated so much more, I think sometimes there can be like a little bit of regret or grief on like, oh, but I wasn't present then at those sweet beginning stages.
Yeah.
You know, and so I like your approach at being able to just remind yourself to trust, to be okay with the unknown, to accept, which I mean, it's just like a huge life lesson, so that you can still have some of that presence without even having to know or thinking you know the answer, what's going to happen,
how it's going to work out.
Yeah.
What if it already is?
What if it's working out right now?
What if it's working out right now?
That's all there is.
That's all there fucking is. And in these moments, situations, building of relationships, we both have a cognitive and somatic response to all of it. And so like we do need to soothe ourselves cognitively, and it's so important that we soothe ourselves somatically.
What does that mean?
That means taking care of our body.
Yeah.
And one thing, I was listening up to an attachment podcast before coming here, and it was as we do because we're anxious, and it was talking much more about the biological side of this system as opposed to the psychology side of the system. And I found it really fascinating, and a lot of it went in one ear and out the other. But my main takeaway was that this is biological, and we can't just talk it away. We have to work with our system to take care of ourselves. And this goes back to something I've already said, is like in these crushes and wonderful experiences of love and excitement, we can't look towards them to take care of that.
Yep.
Entirely.
Yeah.
Do I want them to? Yeah. Yeah, please do it. Take it away from me.
If I just meet the right person,
If I just meet the right person, they will, and I don't have to play the game, and I can be obsessive.
I don't have to heal at all.
Nope, don't need to do any of that. Like the most realistic outcome is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What if it works out? Okay, time to go on a run. Okay, time to eat a balanced meal. okay, time to sleep for 8 hours.
Take a bath.
Take a bath.
Read a book.
Take a nap. Hang out with your friends who are a secure attachment for you.
Yes.
And not sit in the compulsion.
Hang out with the people that already like you, already know you in a more meaningful way than how someone knows you when you're crushing.
Right.
I love that. I love that kind of dual care.
Because we're zoomed in. We say, okay, if this one person doesn't like me, it's over.
Yep.
We're so done. I'm never dating again.
No.
I'm not putting myself out there. And that's how a lot of people feel all the time, me included sometimes. And then until you meet the next person. And then you're like, wow, that was unexpected.
Yeah.
Now I'm feeling it again. And like, you brought up a great opportunity to like go hang out with your friends, have a secure foundation with someone 8 years, 10 years, whatever it is, 1 year, and be like, hey, I met someone. I don't know how it's going to work out, but here's all the exciting feelings I have right now.
Yes.
Isn't it cool to be alive?
Yes. And let yourself be excited. Like, you know, and we've talked a lot about, you know, the cognitive and somatic, you know, processes, and there's also like the energetic level that I like to bring in and think about. And one of the best, most generating energies we can have in our body is excitement and optimism and hope and joy. And so it's like, let yourself be in that a little bit too.
Yeah.
Like I love, you know, you kind of know this too. If somebody has something exciting, especially in the dating realm, I play it up
You're so
a little.
annoying.
Yeah, and like, oh, they like you, or like, if somebody's like just recently, you know, officially boyfriend or girlfriend, I'm like, oh, you're a boyfriend, like your boyfriend said that, because it's like, be like with it and be excited about it. Like it's so fun.
This is like not what you're saying, but the opposite of what you're saying is foreboding joy.
Yep.
Is our girly Brene,
Yes.
who talked about this a lot, of it not allowing ourselves to get excited and to talk about the love feelings and like the exciting delusions you have about them, because if you talk about them, then you're going to get hurt. And if you talk about them, then it's not going to work out and you're going to jinx yourself.
You're going to have further to fall because you got excited.
And what are your friends going to think of you?
Oh, oof.
What are your friends going to think of you who's just like crushing all the time? That's really real for me, is like the fear of judgment and the fear of what other people are going to think about me.
What are they going to think about you, that you tried, that you hoped, that you
How dare
put
you?
yourself out there?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's like when you're like, I don't want to tell these people I applied for this job because what if I don't get it?
Oh my God.
Why do we do that? I mean, too many reasons to list, but foreboding joy, that is a big one with dating. That's kind of, that goes back to the false hindsight thing. Like that's what I'm talking about, of like, just why do we steal the good moments from ourselves? Because we think it'll hurt less. It's an illusion. It is an illusion that if you do not let yourself feel joyful, that it will hurt less if it's taken away or if something doesn't work out.
And that's how we like, the illusion is our control.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because at least I can keep myself down.
Yeah.
You know, and I can control what happens when I'm just, you know, I don't date and I don't put myself out there.
And I knew it wasn't going to work out.
I knew. Yeah, right. I just confirmed. The ego just confirmed with itself.
Yeah, so we're
I was
good.
right all along.
Now I feel nothing.
Yep. Okay, so this has been so amazing. I mean,
Okay.
this conversation's been everything I wanted and more. Anything else to add? Anything you want to share with listeners, where they can find you, how they can follow you?
If you'd like to follow me, I'm at therapy_Ben on Instagram.
Yes.
And TikTok, but that one's a little less exciting right now. Who knows? Maybe that one will be more exciting in the future.
It's worth a follow to figure out if it gets more exciting.
You never know. I'm sure I'll be posting about this, which I'm excited about.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful time.
All right. If you liked this, follow along to hear more as I just continue to talk to cool people like Ben and explore spirituality, mental health, and everything you need to know to, you know, make your prescription for living well. So thanks.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.